Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning. This is your host, Llorraine Neithardt, and you have reached Venus Unplugged, the place where all things Venusian are discussed, explored, revealed. Today, I just wanted to do a reminder that if you want the Blog Talk Radio episode to be sent directly to you, you need to go to Blog Talk Radio and sign up for the show, and they will send it to you, so you don't have to go hunting and pecking. I also put it up on my Facebook, which is Llorraine Neithardt, and that's the story, Morning Glory. So today, last week I wasn't here. Ann and I went out to Fire Island, and we had a fabulous time having pomegranate margaritas and lobster. Not bad for two dames, huh? So, as I am cleaning out my bookshelves, which literally I've got thousands of books that I have read over the last 40 years, and I came across a book. It's called Knowing Women by Irene D. Castillo, Castillejo. Now, it's important. She was a first-generation Jungian, right? So it's important when you're studying anything to, try to get as close to the originals as possible. Now, reading Jung's Red Book, which just came out, a couple of years ago, or his collected works is like eating rock soup. You got to have a lot of courage, and the lingo and everything else. All right. But with this Knowing Women, what she talks about now, of course, she wrote this 40 years ago, so there has been a lot of change in the feminine psychology, but it is still important what she is discussing in this book. So I reread it with great joy. I read it like 20 years ago. And she wrote it actually in 1973. And we need to understand that we can only be deeply sane when we know our own madness or our own shadow or our own unrelatedness or relatedness. We need to know all our parts, and that's what this 21st century is bringing forth. That's what it asks of us. Not just being born and slugging away, but becoming conscious. And what are we becoming? What does that mean to become conscious? We're becoming conscious of what we don't know about. That's what being conscious is. Not what somebody else is telling you what you don't know about, but what you discover within your own dreams and fantasies and writings and imaginations, your projections. These are all ways that we go like, hey, we can either go there, but for the grace of God go I, and that's kind of admitting that you too have that within, all right, or the absolute denial until hopefully one gets an insight or at least plays with the idea. This be a hidden part of myself that's trying to show itself, and the only way it can do that is by meeting this cuckoo bird, as opposed to the cuckoo bird within. All right, we've all got one. We've probably got a flock. I know I do. I've got that little Von Trapp family within. So what she talks about, and I may actually, for the next couple of weeks, be talking about this because it's really, really good, sane stuff. So she first talks about meeting, to be met. And now, in the world of cell phones, nobody looks up. I mean, we are so going to lose our connection to our North Star because it keeps on spinning around. People don't step to the right, they're all of that. So it's like they don't meet. And it's an art to me. It's the most important thing that we can do. You know, when we see ourselves in someone else's eyes, or feel the heart of another, or go into that strange place. It's like when you haven't seen your best friend for years, and you just connect, and it's as if no time, because the connection in Hawaiian shamanism, which is Ho'oponopono, they call it the Aka cords, AKA. They are strong, these invisible cords. And we meet. Sometimes we can meet a stranger and never forget. Must have been 25 years ago. I'm on the bus. I'm coming uptown, and I struck up a conversation with this dapper old man. And oh God, I'm just watching him. He's got spats on. He's like so cool, right? And we got to talking, whatever. And as we were both getting off on 57th Street, he turns around and he says to me, "Religion." And I look at him like, "Yeah." And he says, "They're all a racket." I bust out laughing because, you know, I was studying metaphysics and at the First Church of Religious Science, and I was doing all those types of things. And it was like, so in his crone wisdom, he gave me a great warning, which is it doesn't matter what other people say. You have to integrate it within your own religio. Word religion means to connect. So yes, we can have an experience of other people's faith, but it needs to be tested in time and space within ourselves. The study is the training wheels, and the practice is going deeper and deeper, because we can hit some, and must hit, some really trippy places. So she talks about meeting, okay, and, you know, sometimes we can have a conversation with someone and we can come out exhausted or refreshed. If we're exhausted, we didn't really meet. There wasn't anything that really happened in that conversation. But if we met the person on some level, we come out thinking about it. I mean, what's more interesting and exciting than you meeting somebody? It could be a stranger, a friend, whatever, a psychic, and you think about it, and you feel your way through, and you've been touched or annoyed, whatever it is. But it stays with you. I mean, and you continue to carry on the conversation and think about it and feel your way through. Then you know you've been met. And this is what she talks about in the first chapter. And that she talks about, which I find very, very interesting, meetings that we have meetings with people and on various levels. And there are meetings of the body and the mind, and there's meetings in the realm of the intellect, and during the companionship of daily living or in working together. Meetings can be every conceivable degree of closeness or duration, and on one level or all at once. There could be meetings of mystical and spiritual intensity, but on no level does mere physical proximity or mutual exchange of ideas necessarily constitute a meeting. Frequently, I'm just reading from her right here, frequently husbands and wives have the closest physical intimacy for years, and yet no real meeting. Each is wrapped away in an isolation of their own. So that's, he doesn't talk to me. He doesn't talk. Not about talking with the beloved or the children or whomever. It's the meeting, that connection. We feel that real connection or being seen, even for a second. It lasts. It's not about words. So I love what she's informing us of. And so there are these, and what she's saying here, for there to be a meeting, it seems as though a third, a something else, is always present. When I do sessions, I call it spirit, just because it's the spirit of. Sometimes it's the spirit of love or chaos or whatever it may be, but there is a spirit, there is an essence or the connection to the higher self. And, then I shadow dive into parts of the unknown for the person and bring up these rough pearls and jewels from the unconscious that is then given to them to work on. And that's part of what goes on in a session. So she talks here about the third, something else is always present. You may call it love, or you can call it the Holy Spirit, or Jungians would say that is the presence of the self. That's with a capital S, S-E-L-F. If this other is present, there cannot have failed to be a meeting. So when you feel unseen, check within yourself. What's going on? Am I being met? And it's not an ego meeting. It's not we all have narcissism. I mean, it's not a negative thing. I mean, in the collective culture, people think it's negative. I mean, you can have a tremendous narcissistic wound. And that means you may be able to love yourself, but it's very difficult to love others. And that's not what I'm talking about. It's like the self-interest, the longing to connect. That's healthy. Or if you're saying something to somebody, they're absolutely not paying any attention. We feel enraged. We feel wounded. We feel unseen. Not from the ego, just the loss. And it reminds us of our longing or our loneliness of not being met. And we're in deep space here, man, with everybody on their cell phones and all of that. Find ways, even if it's like a look, to practice that kind of meeting. Okay, and then she talks about here, the modern emphasis on relationships between only two people can sometimes degenerate into mere exclusiveness and a self-conscious sharing, which, valuable though it is, may become an infringement of privacy or an abuse of intimacy, which is very interesting. Deliberate sharing is sometimes as dangerous as sympathy. I love that she sees sympathy can be very, very dangerous because it's kind of like an in-between space. You don't want to really feel, what's really going on. Your shadow may be up because you want to kick the person for being, so silly or whatever you may be annoyed about. But it's like, I feel bad for them instead. Why? Something to feel bad about. Unless they truly are a victim of something, or if it's a child or animals. But in general, we got our game. We're playing it out. And that's the interesting thing. Being able to look, to meet the person deep within. I think that's why we love animals so much. They meet us. They're there when they're there, okay? So new ideas which are forming in the depths of the mind can actually be destroyed or crippled when we share too soon. And that's very important. There are times to just be silent, particularly, when you're just starting a creative project and you may want to share, and then you share with the wrong person, and then their unconscious envy comes up, and then the next thing you know, you're not writing your book anymore, or you're not dancing your dance. Because what got shared was envy. So, we need to be able to be aware of these levels. Being honest isn't telling everybody in the world what's going on. That's being nervous. That's not honesty. All right? Or sometimes it's, like in Bambi, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. Or sometimes with some people, their first thought, keep it quiet and do the second thought. Because sometimes their first thought is like, it's murderous. It's like, really? What was that about? Just spits out. So if people get in trouble for that, just speak the second thought. Think the first thought, speak the second one, okay? So here she's talking about how, when we're working on something, it needs to be formulated in the depths of it's kind of like a little hen sitting on her eggs, keeping them nice and warm until they're ready to hatch. Or we can't give birth to the baby too early, or digging up seeds prematurely. See, we need to be able to respect one another's personal privacy is as important as sharing thoughts. And the deepest communication will in any place take place in moments of silence. If we know how to get to that place, so that this is important too. We can meet in silence. Many years ago, I was in Corsica at a naturalist camp, and I met this little German boy, and he was the youngest of 5 boys, and his mother had just given birth to a girl. I guess he was 4 or 5, and so, of course, needless to say, he was very lonely, and his mama was busy with the girl. And so every day we would meet in the Mediterranean, and we would play and blah, blah, blah. And one day the father came to where I was staying and to meet me, because the child would go home and tell him about all these mermaid games we would play and blah, blah, blah. And the father is quite curious. He spoke English. Most of the people were German and French speaking. And the father was quite surprised. He said, "Your German must be very good." I said, "No, I can't speak, an ounce." "Really?" And he said, "Well, that's amazing." Because, then he asked me the things. Well, I said, "Well, we were playing this, and then we were playing that." And although the little boy and I spoke completely different languages, we met, and therefore we could engage in the play and the imagination, and we knew exactly what one another were doing and feeling. So that's that essence of meeting. It's not always words. We can meet in the imagination. I mean, we certainly know we can meet in the imagination when we're aggravated with somebody. God knows we have all sorts of fights and revenges and all those, those great serial killer fantasies that we can have. But this is a different kind of meeting. And then she says here, sometimes she wonders if it is wise to work directly at relationships. What matters is to be centered oneself, willing and ready, always ready for the moments or hours of meeting when they come. Then the relationship can be trusted and taken care of itself. Every time, she thinks it is one's own attitude, not the relationship, on which one needs to work. It is, in fact, that in any partnership, if one of the partners becomes quite clear in himself what it is that the situation requires, the chances are that they will not even be necessary to voice it. The other will somehow pick up the point and comply with no words. Internal clarity always seems to have been the effect of invisible guiding force, which can be trusted to affect each person who has achieved inner clarity. New paths appear and doors open without the need to knock. And then she goes on here with the willingness to be met, the knowledge of how to be met. And she talks that there are 3 different reasons. Sometimes people are not willing or unwilling to dive deep enough to meet. In this case, she's talking about, to working with the patient. Or if I, as a psychic, if I'm not willing to dive deep into their psyche, they're not going to get much. And sometimes I can dive a little too deep, and it's like they listen to the tape, a few weeks later, and then it's, now I get it. So, but that's what it is. We need to be willing to go deep, not invasive. And that's also what the art of empathy. With empathy, we meet the person. We don't have any sage advice. We sit, we witness, we tell them what to do. We've been there. We know what that is. I'll wait with you until you find your way. Not screaming from on high some great spiritual truth, which does guts for you when you're in the bowels of the unconscious, because that struggle, the struggle that we feel, is the unconscious trying to make itself conscious. That's the birth pangs. And we can misinterpret it and think, oh, I'm going crazy, or here comes the depression. I mean, all of those energies, that's what it feels like. But in truth, it's psyche trying to make herself known to you, something you did not know. And that's kind of cool. Maybe you didn't know that you had the courage to stand up and say, no, that won't be happening, or walk away, or recognize, I don't know, one could be a bully. One can learn that. And, a lot of times in family, like humor, family humor, a lot of times it's bullying. It's a way to get over. Oh, I was only kidding. It's like, oh, how come I don't find it funny? We were only kidding. So, that when we're met, I mean, I guess that would be a negative way of meeting somebody, right? They say there's something they think is funny, but really underneath it's really nasty, right? Or sometimes the person may be nice externally, but they got a nasty kid inside, and then the two kids get into a fight. That happens, right? But what she's talking about here, what she sees this as is that how do we fail to meet? And she comes up with three very valuable possibilities, and I'm sure there's even more. And she says here, there seems to be three main reasons for not being met, okay? The first is that we are often living on a different level of awareness from the other person. Okay, that's pretty clear. The second is that one of us, at least, is often playing a role or is somehow possessed. Okay, so it's like, I am the mother. Mommy Dearest ain't letting go of being Mommy Dearest. So there's always you're not going to meet the need, because Mommy Dearest, then you have to play child, good child, bad child, rageful child, whatever it is. But when it's met, when, let's just say, one of the parents truly meets us without having any answer, but just really curious, like, who is this being that has come through? That's the meaning. And she talks here, all right, so then we have the second, playing the role, and somehow possessed, or the role of the great doctor or lawyer or Indian chief, or a child or victim. If we're in our nonsense, we can't meet. We're rolling around the soil there, playing our game. Okay? And the third is that we fail to listen to each other. I think we take in the sound with our ear, but we listen through the heart. The words can go in, but the listening, it's like babbling water. You can experience the current. And then when this is what kind of happens in my heart, and I feel this current, and then I get what's really being said. Not the words, understand the words perfectly, but the meaning. You see, the soul gives the meaning, and that's part of being met. So over the week, just start noticing who do you really meet with, who you don't, where do you shy away, and sometimes that's a really cool thing to do. So there's no right and wrong. And then she goes on to talk here about with children that most children, and that was us once too, and hopefully we'll get back there again sooner than later. That most children are born with, and many women retain a diffused awareness of the wholeness of nature, where everything is linked with everything else, and they feel themselves to be part of an individual whole, which I think is very true. There is a tendency, and I'm not saying it's exclusive, because I've met plenty of men who have this capacity. They can feel that, and they can feel that they don't want to be broken into parts. And so that's why children can come up with these wise utterances, because they're connected. They get the grid, they get the power. Okay, so this is where the wisdom lies of artists and words and parables, prophets and spokens, and so that they have these ears that can hear. So we're looking at that. So just notice when we have a diffused, kind of unfocused consciousness. Okay, that's the feminine, the essences, the yous, coloring outside the lines, okay? Focused consciousness is the ego. I'm going to set that goal, I'm going to read that book, I'm going to dance that dance, whatever we're going to do, we're focused on it. And the feminine is the diffuse. So just start noticing. Till next week. Talk to you then. And have absolutely beloved week. And MBO, most benevolent outcome of whatever you are up to. Take care. Bye.
You're going to kill the love of my life.
Casey!
If I don't go back to what I was doing.
Our line of work is quite brutal and quite ruthless.
How far would you go for love?
You steal truck, bring it to me. Then you make your money.
Is it dangerous?
Of course it's dangerous!
Nicholas Hoult, Felicity Jones, with Ben Kingsley and Anthony Hopkins.
All this trouble, all this pain, for love.
Collide. Now playing. Rated PG-13. May be inappropriate for children under 13.